Sanbonani. What is happening? Oh, it's this way. Hello, hello, hello. Yo! Hello. Morning. This lovely winter morning. Phew, Ninjani po. I hope that you are well. There's so much going on. Feelings can be strong. Feelings can be strong at this time because it is retrograde season. Oh, is that any better? I asked guys, Mzamil, let the record show I tried. Okay. Sanbonani, welcome to Sangoma Society. Mina Makhosi Nomabutho, and this is Sangoma Society, where we demystify the ancestral and the astral. And today we will be reading the retrograde for 2025. Now, before I get into it, I'm just going to express why we even read the retrograde itself. In the context of the ancestral, umuntu ophethwe yidlozi is the conduit, the vessel for whatever is going to come through from the ancestral realm. So if a cup is dirty or a cup has something else in it, and then that message from the ancestors comes in, or enye into ephuma ngaphandle ingene phakathi kwaleyo nto, it contaminates or affects what is within that vessel, right? And is contaminated with what is in that vessel. So that becomes the lens. What's happening in this vessel becomes the lens through which the person, ophila nedlozi, is interpreting whatever they may be reading, whatever they may be feeling, whatever they may be seeing. But when we give context to what affects all of us as the inhabitants of this little piece of rock flying through the universe, then we have better and clearer perspective about how we're going to say ukuthi lento le actually, is it a personal experience? Is it a communal experience? And what is it for? Because there are things that happen, and if we don't realize that there's a reason that they're happening and there's an opportunity within them, we can just find ourselves fighting against them, not knowing Uguti, we're actually supposed to be in surrender, or the rhythm in which we're supposed to be meeting the, right? So that is why we read the retrograde. Retrogrades in general do not need to cause panic, okay? There's a reader, Stars, Moon, and Sun. I love her interpretation of retrogrades. She's like a decade older than me and has been practicing astrology exclusively for like 30 years already. I've only been a healer for 10 years, guys. So she said, retrogrades are just everything are reconsideration, review, remembering, like that's what you do in a retrograde. Now, when we read through the retrograde, what we're going to be looking at is the planet. So this is what it rules. Like this is, say, the planet is the energy, what it rules, what it governs, And then once we've got that, then we look at the planet that it's the sign that it's moving through. So the energy that individual is going to be affected by as they make their way through the universe and influence us, and how then we interpret that more personally is you can go into your own personal birth chart and look at where that planet is in your natal sign, and that will give you an idea of how it individually affects you, just in general. Then, if you want to look at the timing of it right now, that's going to be different. Things are going to be affected by your rising sign, and that will determine which house that planet will be passing through for you. At this moment in time, we don't do you the last part on this platform. Here we're looking at how do I show up as a member of my community under these different transits in the coming months, and who am I, and how are these things affecting me as umuntu, right? Let's have a look at that. So all the planets retrograde at this time. We have 3 planets retrograde today. The third planet stationing retrograde today was Saturn. Saturn is just stationed retrograde in the first degree of Aries. It will be going back into Pisces later in the year. It joins. Yo! Wait, Makhosi. Yo! Yo! Hey, Makhosi. It joins Neptune, which stationed retrograde in Aries on the 4th of July. These 2 planets are moving together, not quite conjunct, but parallel to one another in their journey through Aries. And I'm quite interested to see what happens next year when they do start to dance a little bit more closely and aspect each other. But for now, Neptune is the ruler of dreams. So I mentioned in the communique about this reading that if your dreams have been really faint in the last couple of weeks, or you've noticed that you're dreaming differently, like it's a new world in there. Um, you're struggling to remember, or you're dreaming differently. Those things, that's being affected by Neptune being retrograde. So Neptune is the ruler of dreams. And when we're seeing the retrograde right now in Aries, it is giving us a little pause to review how we see into our own subconscious, into our own higher selves, into the astral as well. So it is that powerful. Although we can also say that Neptune retrograde every year. It's not a rare retrograde. This is something that's periodic, and it does so for a significant amount of time. But again, it is an opportunity to review being delusional, the things that you have jumped into, you're going to start to see the themes of that in your dream space now, while it is still retrograding in Aries, right? When we come to the end of October, on the 22nd of October, 2025, Neptune will be moving back into Pisces, still retrograde. And now there may be some rude awakenings, because Neptune will be in its ruling sign. Pisces is the ruler of Neptune. And this is where, like, Neptune is kind of in its what do they call it? When it's at the best place it could be. I forgot what it's called when it's in its that. And when Neptune is in Pisces and is exalted in Pisces and retrograde at the same time, what happens is that we're going to have the scales fall off. You know, if there's any scales like covering our eyes in terms of the perspectives that we're holding about situations we are in, people, the things that we think we can do, again, because Saturn is moving along with Neptune. So that effect of Saturn, and Saturn being the disciplinarian, and Saturn being things that can be done, right? And reconsiderations around those in this, as Saturn continues retrograde, right? But Saturn's going to move out of Aries back into Pisces in on September 1st. So right now, in the next 6-7 weeks, we are still in in a time where we're looking at the very practical aspects of what we think we can do and reviewing that. So it's like the dreams and the practice, like putting them into action concurrently. This is a great time to review, like, and almost life is also bringing that review. You know, it's like it's if it feels like there's some things that are smacking you in the face right now, some rude awakenings around work stuff, around that sort of thing, it's because that energy is what is in play. So these two, the dreamer and the worker, and like how do we make the dreams that we have, Neptune, uh, work in the real world, Saturn, and they're moving together, right? But when we get to the end of October, there, October 22, what Neptune is going to do is any delusion there is around that is going to fall away, and we're going to start to see some rude awakenings, some real things. But it's not going to be happening in isolation, because we've also got um, a very strong retrograde that is going to be um, effective at that time of year, is going to be the Uranus retrograde. Oy! Now, Uranus is going to station retrograde now on September 6th. So that's still about, what is that, 8 weeks away? Okay, fine. Um, Still plenty time to get a sense of what Uranus and Gemini will do directly in your life. So really, really want to look at what is unexpected, what is surprising, like what's the theme around the surprises for you right now, because this is when Uranus in Gemini is still direct, right? And remember that Uranus is going to station retrograde in Gemini and then retrograde back into Taurus in November. And like what we want between now and November is to get a really good idea of what Uranus is doing. Because when we are planning the next decade, and when we come to like the astrological new year in 2026, and we're saying, look, we're looking at the next 10 years, we have to review 5-year plan, 10-year plan, whatever. You want to be able to look at what sudden changes happened for you, what was new for you, because that's what Uranus is. It is what is new, it is what can be unexpected, it is, yeah, right? So but also Uranus is, Oi, Makhosi, a planet that does, as much as it affects us individually, the effect is coming from what happens within our community as a whole, right? So we're shifting as a society under the influence of Uranus shifts, right? Um, it's a slow horse of the revolution. It is one of the most significant horses in the revolution. And what Uranus is going to be doing when we see it go back into Taurus in November 7th is going to be interesting. We are all waiting with bated breath to see what is actually going to happen there, because there are so many things concurrently happening right there astrologically at the end of October, beginning of November, that are not just tied to that moment, but also going back to the Scorpio eclipse that we had around the dying of the Pope, and then the previous year, the Scorpio eclipse, where we saw a lot, the Scorpio full moon eclipse of 2024, where we saw a lot of alliances being made. So it's like when Trump joined teams with J.D. Vance, when the GNU was formed here. So, like, it was not a good time to be making alliances to begin with. And that was because when we see these transits coming up this November, what was ratified back then is likely to start clicking now. Do you get? So very, very curious to see what will happen. There were some incredibly beautiful dates within May 2024 that were like spectacularly beautiful for forming unions, but it was just like threading the eye of the needle. So it's really a coin toss, and very interested to see what will come in November 2025. But it is a time of year that we've been talking about for several years, that this is an interesting time. And again, it is also being affected by this Pluto retrograde, which has been happening now since the 4th of May. And Pluto retrograde, it's stationed retrograde, opposing Black Moon Lilith. So again, the shadow, right? Things that have happened in darkness coming to light. And again, Pluto being the biggest horse of like the revolution, the biggest slow horse that there is, and Pluto in Aquarius being this thing that we have all waited decades for and has always been forecast to be extremely revolutionary. And I think we're seeing the themes of that in terms of what is happening with us in technology, what is happening with us in terms of communication. And when you couple Pluto in Aquarius with Uranus in Gemini, the speed at which change is happening makes a lot of sense. Where AI can go, not just AI, but technology, and not just that technology is happening in the hands of others, but how we react to technology, how we repurpose technology. Yo, Makhosi. A lot of what has been spoken about with Makhosi, Pluto in Aquarius and Uranus in Gemini is the speed of change with technology. Not enough has been said about how, as people, as the end user, we are capable where technology goes, in terms of something may be designed to be used in one way, but we as the end user can repurpose it to suit us, right? And I think that we're going to see possibly unexpected shifts in what that can do, in what can happen, really in that window for me. Yo, Makhosi, I just want to see what's happening on October 13th, because I'm getting around October 13th. Kukhona nje, an influence there that, okay, so Pluto retrograde ends on October 13th. So I think when that Pluto retrograde ends, and before, um, Uranus in Gemini re-enters Uranus leaves Gemini to go into Taurus in that small window there when Uranus is still retrograde in Gemini, but Pluto is direct in Aquarius. That small window, there's going to be some, something. I'm like, I don't remember the astrology around the Arab Spring, but I think the Arab Spring, for instance, is a political event that really changed how we understood how we could use social media, especially Twitter, as a place for like activist engagement. Do you know? So I don't know which platform it's going to be or how we're going to do it. But in that window there, I think that there's a possibility where we're going to see technology not being used in the way that the founders expected, but that we, the people, repurposing it to fit the need that we have, and possibly with everything happening at that time, it might be a little explosive. No, maybe. I don't know. I don't know. Okay, let's bring it back a little bit closer into the next few days, literally. We have Mercury stationing retrograde in Leo on the 18th of July. What is that? Probably on Friday. Yo! Listen, Mercury in Leo, we want to talk. We want to talk and we want to talk about ourselves. The retrograde is reminding you, Valala, keep it mum. Okay? And Leo, especially, where there's promise, where there are plans, where things look like they might go nice. Like, if nothing is on, if the money is not in your account, don't talk about it. Don't count it. If the offer letter is not signed and you are not sitting in that office, don't talk about it. Okay? If the baby is not born and in your hands and breathing, don't talk about it. Don't tell anybody your business right now. Not your plans, not your hopes, not your dreams. It is not the time. If you're talking about something, let it be something that is in motion, that currently exists, that is happening, not what is coming, not what is intended. Because with Leo and Mercury retrograde in Leo specifically, evil eye. Okay? Ubuthakathi bakithi. You understand? Um, for us, Leo season here in the Southern Hemisphere and in Africa, Southern Africa, generally, abelaphi bendabuko during that time, yo, is when seasons we give the earth her time to reconstitute herself, right? Um, we don't go out into the world to do things because typically a time when your efforts could be flipped back on themselves, right? Um, you may have to make considerations because again, this is happening at the time when Saturn is also retrograde in Aries. So if there are things that are happening that are making you reconsider how you show up, how you look, how you communicate, go with them. If you like, if there's things, Nje, that are coming that make you feel like it's time to end things, really review that, really consider, give it your consideration, because something that's interesting that will be happening, my course, in Okay, August, we're going to have Libra, Mars in Libra, in the first degree of Libra. Wait, before that, sorry, July 20th, on Sunday next, we're having Mars conjoining the South Node in Virgo. So this week, can we really, really take today's energy of Saturn going retrograde and relook, right? Use this week for review, because when Friday comes, Mars conjoining the South Node in Virgo, it is getting your house in order time. I have been saying getting your house in order, getting your house in order, getting your house in order, but you have to, because um, come August 8th, Mars is going to be in the first degree of Libra. Okay, decisions are going to have to be made, because it's going to be opposing Saturn retrograde in Aries. So when we enter the Yin Lento, Lionsgate, right? So we enter the Lionsgate, this massive portal of opportunity that is a historically African celebration, astrological celebration, and commemoration of how humanity came to be here from the multiverses from which we descend. That science only caught up to like in 1957. We've been doing for millennia and acknowledged and known about for millennia. The planets that transit Sirius A and Sirius B through our night sky during the Lion's Gate. Now, when that time comes this year, we're going to have to make serious decisions about work and dreams, like what it is that you say you dream of for yourself and how you make that come to pass in the world. The Lionsgate this year is going to be major on that, right? So you have to be using right now to make your considerations, to look at things. That's why we've been saying, come into pivoting into purpose and use that vehicle to, have your guided meditations where your ancestors are showing you what is possible for you, where the path of highest purpose is for you in this life, and like what practical action to take right now, because decisions will have to be made when we see on August 8th Mars in Libra opposing Saturn in Aries. Mars in Libra, not a great place for Mars because it's difficult. There's options and you have to weigh up a lot, right? So get your house in order before that happens. All your paperwork, all your everything, Jay, done, so that by the time that comes, you're not like you're with your back up against the wall trying to make sense of this. You get me? That you can play. Yo, Marcos. Yeah, Marcos. Make decisions with the necessary information already in hand. And then 6 weeks after that is going to be the African New Year, right? Um, Time to hit the ground running. So, like, if you're not using this time to plan internally, when things are happening externally, you're going to really feel overwhelmed and confused. Um, and there's no need for that, because all these things are happening for you. Okay. We're going um, just after the African New Year on September 24th, Mars in the first degree of Scorpio, so exalted, ready for action, squaring with Pluto retrograde. So, a personal planet in a place of action, squaring up against environmental factors, things happening around us as a community where we feel internally determined about the actions that we are prepared to take. May it be that that happens for you at a time when you know the action it is that you're taking. Now, coming up at the end of the year, we're going to have our annual Mercury retrograde out of Scorpio and back into Sagittarius between November 9 and 29th. That's almost always the same every year. It's just a really good time to sit with yourself and reconsider how it is that you are going to show up in your relationships in the year to come and what's different that you can bring, because that Scorpio is going to bring up some resentment issues internally, and Sagittarius is going to bring up some innovative ways of coming up against that. Then the last retrograde for the year is Jupiter retrograding in Cancer, November 11th until March 10, 2026. We're in Jupiter in Cancer right now. So we're already seeing what that feels like. And I don't know about you, but I have been loving how generous the energy of this transit feels. Everybody had said that, let's not overhype it, but like, hype it sometimes, man. I mean, it arrived and then it just went Kazimi same time. Like, it was so serious about itself. Why should we pretend like it's not? You know? I think when we see this retrograde happening, the sun is going to be in Scorpio when that starts. I think we might get a sense of, especially because we will have just experienced um, Neptune retrograding back into Pisces at the end of October. So that Neptune and Pisces, those scales falling away, we might get a sense of like resource guarding is all the word I can think of. When dogs don't want to share, where we start to like our scarcity, our limiting beliefs around scarcity are going to surface, right? Um, and I think it will be a good time for us to consider doing the work around those limiting beliefs, because that is essentially what I think this Jupiter retrograde in Cancer is going to give us, an opportunity to learn about ourselves. And like if we see that in our community where there's a little bit more jealousy, a little bit more like people trying to curb opportunities, people trying to close off things like, that weirdness. It's that Jupiter in Cancer going retrograde there on the 11th of November till yo. And then guys, ngicela niqaphele man, qiniswani guys, because between this Mercury retrograde, which starts now on the 18th of July to August 11th, that's in Leo, just in terms of evil eye and what have you, like, umuntu uyaqiniswa, be fortified, right? You go, you get cleansed. Um, before August, if you know that you have cleansings that are pending and bekumele ukuthi uqiniswe, talk to your healer, have that conversation with you. How can we make it happen before this month ends? Because ngempela, like imikhonto izobe iphumile, abantu bazobe baphonsa. It's not going to be nice. And when November comes, and that Jupiter retrograde in Cancer is happening, that's also another time where I would say, that resource guarding, that scarcity mentality, those limiting beliefs really playing on people's minds, and people who aren't looking at themselves as the cause for the situations that are playing out in their lives. They may be looking at others, And if it is you who are being looked at, please make sure that you are fortified by the time these transits are happening. If you cannot do it now, make sure ukuthi you're using the time, your September, your October. Yo! Ukuthi izinto maziqala ukuthi ziba hectic at the end of October. Yay! You are shielded and protected because it's ugly out here. When we don't do the work as abantwana bethongo, when we don't do the inner work, the shadow work, when we don't connect with our ancestors in the ways that are possible, when we limit the capacity of where our ancestors are capable of guiding us and meeting us and taking us to, when we move in that darkness, then it's very easy for us to choose darkness as the way that we show up in the world, to choose awothatha lento ayinabungozi, inobungozi lento and khona olimalayo, and it can be you, okay? And it's very easy for abantu ukuthi baqale to tell themselves stories about their situations being caused by the actions of other people because they refuse to take accountability for the part that they have played in landing themselves up where they are today. And when we don't do the work, and when we don't dive into our shadows, and when we don't give compassion to the parts of ourselves that evolved into what they are because of the trauma that we have survived, when we try to shut those parts of ourselves away, when we try to forget that it ever happened, those things resurface in our actions in ways that we cannot anticipate. And we can't afford that if we are truly here to use this incarnation for all of what it can be. We've chosen this life. We asked for so much of what we are experiencing today, including the challenges, in order for our eternal soul to evolve into the truth of whom we can be and whom we intended to be in this life. So I hope that understanding how these retrogrades will impact you and your community at this time gives you the capacity to look at yourself differently, look at your community differently, and look at what is possible differently, and show up more intentionally for yourself and for your community. It has been, as always, a privilege to be in your presence. Mina Makhosi Nomabutho. This is Sangoma Society, where we demystify the astral and the ancestral. You can find us at sangomasociety.co.za. You can get personalized readings. You can find our programs as well to do the shadow work, the ascension work, and to do gratitude work as well as grief work. The gift of grief is always available to those who seek it, as well as answers from our ancestors if you're just trying to figure out how you actually feel about the concept of the ancestral Nje and its existence. And trying to situate yourself in the politics that govern those relationships because everything is political reality. Those resources are there for you on sangomasociety.co.za. If you're looking for me in my personal capacity, please, guys, it's not a workplace. Ne? Honey, tell a story on all social media networks. That's just me being me. This is me at work. Hlukanise, ne? Please, siyabong. And if you're looking for Makhosi Nomabutho, please understand you're not going to get her by becoming friends with Honey, tell a story. I'm not looking for new friends. Enkos, ngiyabonga. But sinele in that department. Okukhona okusedlozini niyazi ukuthi ningithola kanjani. Kube kuhle ngakini bakithi bekukuhle ukuba nani kunikhanyele. sikhule sikhulisane. Impilo yinde iphinde ithande kube nobunzima. Kukhanya. Makhosi. Iyo.